Welcome back to another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast. We're back with another game preview here. BYU traveling to Allen Fieldhouse to take on Kansas. Before we do dive in to the preview, if you have been enjoying our other previews and content, please go ahead and like and subscribe. But diving in here, right, looking at the past few games for both teams, BYU's lost 2 of 3 in probably the toughest stretch of their schedule on the season. At Texas Tech, lost, then had Utah at home before playing Arizona at home on Monday night. Tough loss. Almost came back to steal it. And then now going to Kansas, which we know is not an easy place to play. Kansas playing pretty well right now, won 4 in a row, with one of those wins coming over number 2, Iowa State at the time. But they're playing well, just won this week in dominant fashion despite making just 4 threes against Kansas State, and that was without Darren Peterson. But he's expected back for this game. Should be a fun one between probably the projected top 2 picks. If you had to ask most people, Debanza and Peterson. But Cody, we'll start on the Kansas side. What does Kansas need to do to prevent a BYU win on the road?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that too. They're probably the top 2 picks, and this is a really tough place to play. I think the 96 Bulls would struggle to win at the Fog again against any Kansas team. It's just this place. It's just they do not lose in this arena all that often. But for Kansas to win this game at home against obviously the star power of AJ Debanza, I mean, every single national media network's going to have this game circled, and it's a really good game. But I think there are potentially some more marquee games out there. So, but keys for Kansas, I think the number one thing on the defensive end is it's kind of similar to what Arizona did. It's limit Debanza without having to send too much help. And I think they did. I think Arizona did a phenomenal job. I mean, they limited his efficiency. They have just a plethora of super strong and athletic defenders to throw at him. And I think Kansas kind of has that as well. Arizona threw, it was Pete Karchenkov, a little bit of a Waka, but Waka fouled him on 2 straight possessions, and they were kind of done with that. So, but Kansas does have, similar options like athletic wings and forwards that you can throw at him. And I think the 2 guys that AJ's probably going to see the most time with is Bryson Tiller and Trey White. I think Tiller's a pretty good matchup. He can move very well laterally, side to side. Is a good shot blocker and possesses the physicality, so that Debanza can't just run through a smaller wing. Wings like White is a little bit smaller of a wing. I think Debanza would have a little bit more success. But if those guys can have success in one-on-one, they're going to be in a pretty good spot due to BYU not having elite secondary options. I know Rob Wright and Saunders are obviously awesome, but the more Debanza has the ball in his hands in isolation and isn't knocking it down at a super elite clip, the better Kansas is going to be. He had 24 points on Monday, but he was 5 for 24 from the field. So that's 100% a win for your defense, no matter who it is. And they limited Wright and Saunders to just 25 combined. So, and like I said, I think it's a decent setup for Kansas. They need to limit the glass. They haven't really been all that great on the defensive glass in league play. And BYU is the number 1 offensive rebound rate team in the Big 12 during league play. So I think this is a potential mismatch. I know Kansas isn't going to get overwhelmed in this area. I'd be shocked if BYU had a 50% offensive rebound rate. But the addition of Abdullah Ahmed has made a difference, at least in that area. He's struggled in some other areas. Has been a little bit, he fouls a ton. I will say he's fouled out of a couple games, and he's only played 10 to 12 minutes, and he picks up 5 fouls. But having him as a backup behind Keita has created a very good offensive rebounding unit at the very least. So yeah, they're going to have to keep them off the glass. But besides that, like I said, I think it's a pretty good defensive matchup. On the offensive end, it's basically just get a healthy Darren Peterson, and this offense is much, much better. They're in the 77th percentile in offensive rating against quad 1 and quad 2 teams when DP is in the mix. When he's not on the floor against quad 1 and quad 2 teams, they're in the 65th percentile in offensive rating. So definitely a difference. They're still an okay offense without him, but having him in the mix obviously changes pretty much everything. And BYU, they switch a ton on and off the ball. And I'm not sure how much they're going to be able to do this in this game when you have an elite creator in Darren Peterson who can get downhill and make plays as a scorer and a passer. Like, he's able to make decisions on the fly better than, pretty much, any guard that I've seen over the past few years in college basketball. Just so many different avenues that he can hurt a defense. And, if Rob Wright gets switched on to him, other defenders coming off the bench, if they happen to get switched on to Darren Peterson, like it's not going to be fun for the BYU defense. So I think, if BYU is switching pretty religiously, like just hammer that matchup and force BYU's hand. I wouldn't assume that. I don't think Kevin Young is that stupid, but I think he'll definitely have a backup plan. He mixes up with some zone, maybe force some other guys to make shots, high hedge the ball, get the ball out of Darren Peterson's hands. That's been like the main, defensive scheme that I think he's seen, like a lot of two on the ball against Peterson, force other guys to beat you. And Kansas has proven that they can beat you with some other guys a little bit better than I think we anticipated in the offseason and even early in the season. So credit to, and obviously Bill Self is a great offensive mind. So he definitely always has something up his sleeve. So yeah, honestly, I think it's a pretty decent matchup for Kansas. They win with jump shooting. BYU kind of forces you to knock it down off the bounce, and Kansas doesn't really need the offensive glass or the free throw line to have, offensive efficiency. And, then BYU is like pretty buttoned up on the defensive glass. But then again, I do think Kansas can win this game with their jump shooting ability. So I think it's a pretty good two-way matchup for them.
Yeah, it is. And then factor in, of course, the home court, which like you said, nobody really wins here. And it creates a whole other animal, right? It's a tough spot for BYU, especially like coming off a loss, coming off losing 2 of 3, losing the 2 games that mean way more, at least like mentally to them, than the Utah game, right? I mean, like Utah, they expect to beat the other 2. Of course, you want to get both of them, but winning at Texas Tech, never easy. At home to the number 1 team in the country, you want to get one of those 2. So obviously they're seeking a pretty big win here. And I think offensively it's going to be really important, to win the shot volume battle. Like we talk about a lot of times, teams that can go on the road and control the glass and win the shot volume battle, win the extras, it puts them in a much better spot to win, especially in a place like Allen Fieldhouse where the environment's going to be crazy. To the 2 projected number 2 picks and the top 2 picks in the NBA draft. It's going to be an electric atmosphere, 2 really good teams. So if you can win the second chance opportunity battle in this game, that's going to go a long way. And like you said, Kansas isn't fantastic here. They're outside the top 115 on the defensive glass. BYU, like you said, is first in the Big 12 in league play in offensive rebound rate. So, taking care of that would be huge on the road. And then, generating clean open threes, which I think they'll get some of in this matchup. Kansas gives them up. They're 303rd in three-point rate defense. So they should get a fair amount of open shots. I think it's going to have to rely on the creation of Debanza and Rob Wright to get downhill and spray out to guys. If they could get, the Kennard Davis they got in, the second half of that game the other day, which I forget, did he end up making like 5 or 6 threes? But before that, he had missed, I believe, 17 in a row.
Yeah, it was rough.
So, if they can get that version of him, that would go a long way in this matchup, of course, on the road. If Debanza can make a few, he was 1 of 8 the other night from 3. If he can get comfortable, if they can get Saunders going, that'd be obviously really big. They're going to have to make some shots. They're going to get some shots, some open ones in this matchup. So just make them, of course. And then on the defensive end, what's been really interesting to me in watching BYU this year is when they've needed to turn teams over, they've been able to. When they've needed to speed the game up, they've been able to. Mainly looking at UConn and Arizona. And like Arizona profiles at least numbers wise, very similar to Kansas in the turnover rate department. Arizona was 74th in turnover rate on the offensive end. Kansas is 56. So Kansas slightly better, but there's not a ton of variance between the numbers there, between the two. I don't have them right in front of me, but, I think if BYU can maybe dictate the pace in this game a little bit, they're a team that likes to play a lot faster than Kansas, and they can maybe turn Kansas over. That could come from, like you said, high hedging ball screens and getting the ball out of Peterson's hands, and then having some of these other guys have to make the decisions, have to make plays off the bounce. I think they could. I think BYU's defense has shown the ability when they want to or need to turn teams over, and they're sitting 149th in turnover rate defense, but they've been able to turn over some good teams. Not that UConn takes care of the ball very well, but they've shown the ability to do so against a good team like Arizona as well. So that could be a key, on the defensive end. And then, of course, like we talk about every time against Kansas when Peterson's playing, it's get the ball out of his hands, make someone else beat you. And I think that's going to be the key again here. He's too good. If he's getting mismatches, if he's getting to his spots, you're in trouble. If he's able to create advantages and spray out to guys, it could spell a lot of trouble for this BYU defense. But fortunately, like you said, Kansas isn't really good on the offensive glass. They don't emphasize it. And BYU is really good on the defensive glass. So I think they should be fine in that area. But just making somebody else other than Peterson beat you will be key. But with that, Cody, game picks here. Who do you expect, or who are you taking to win this one?
Yeah, I like Kansas at home here. First off, it's just very difficult to win here, and like I said, I do like the two-way matchup here. I've had concerns with BYU's like other guys, and like I said, defensively for other teams, like when you can slow down Devanza even a little bit, like if he's not shooting 60% from the floor, and you have to completely change what you're doing defensively to, if you have to throw two at him consistently, and like Richie Saunders and Rob Wright beat you, then all three guys are going at the same time, and then they are very tough to beat at that point. But I do think Kansas matches up well enough defensively. This Kansas offense is just completely different when Darren Peterson is on the floor. You have to completely change your defensive scheme when Peterson is on the floor. So I like Kansas to get the job done. I had the score at 81-73.
Yeah, I actually went a little contrarian pick here and went on the other side.
Oh, no.
I like BYU to bounce back here. I don't know what it is. It's more of just a gut feeling. I think they make some shots. I think they get Richie Saunders going. And I think this is a game where like Richie Saunders sort of like the Richie Saunders haters come out when they just get frustrated with this guy because he just won't miss. I think this is a game in this atmosphere where he kind of feeds off that type of stuff. I think they've got some gamers, and if they could get like a little bit from the extras, like you meant, like Davis, Kada, they can get a little bit from those guys. I think it puts them in a decent spot here to pick up a road victory. And like the shot volume battle always goes a long way on the road. So I'm going to take BYU here in a big road victory, getting right a little bit. I have BYU 79-77. But other than that, Cody, anything else to add?
Yeah, I mean, you're just a Kevin Young and Richie Saunders believer. So, I mean, that's enough of an argument for me. I mean, if you're a believer in Kevin Young, which I think a lot of people are, he's an unbelievable offensive mind. So I don't hate it. It's going to be tough, though. It's going to be an uphill battle. But it is what? It's going to be like a 4-point spread. So I mean, it's not like a crazy thing.
No. So should be a really fun game, 4:30 on Saturday. But other than that, we'll wrap things up here. Thank you for listening to the Mainly Hoops podcast.